We actually have some surprising news here. I mean, we have offensive coordinators changing teams. We have Sean Payton getting traded, Tom Brady retiring. We got a decent amount to talk about. But before we get into anything, drop a like, subscribe if you play Dynasty. If you want to check out any of these player props, you want to get in a draft with us, make sure you sign up for Underdog Fantasy. Link in the live chat, link in the description, link in the comment section. When you sign up for Underdog with promo code FLOCK, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to 100. So it's pretty much free for you to check out. And with the minimum of a $10 deposit, you're going to get our 2023 Dynasty rankings. But that should be it. And the number one thing that's happening here is Sean Payton going to Denver. Now, we need to talk about what this means for Russell Wilson, the wide receivers, Javonte Williams. And I first want to address the fact that Sean Payton was traded for a first and second round pick. They traded Sean Payton in a third for a first and second rounder. This tells me right away, regardless of what you may or may not think of the Denver Broncos organization, they are highly confident that Sean Payton moves the needle. That Sean Payton is actually going to be able to make a significant difference for the Denver Broncos. And I kind of understand this from an offensive scheme perspective. Now, of course, it is not this simple. It's not as simple as saying, okay, well, let's look at the average passing yards per game that Sean Payton offenses have had, blah, 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 blah. He had Drew Brees, okay? It was a completely different era. I mean, the NFL has changed so much. It's a completely different set of personnel. It is not as simple as saying this is how good his offenses were then. That's exactly how good the offense is going to be now. But it's at least useful to look at so we have some kind of baseline. And if we're going through and looking at this, for Sean Payton offenses with the New Orleans Saints throughout his entire NFL career, they had 9 top 5 finishes in total offensive points. So 9 times they were top 5 in the NFL in points scored, and 0 times were they in the bottom 10. So you see that not only do they have an incredibly high ceiling in these offenses, but at the same time, the floor is pretty damn high as well. And we need to at least be fair and show where this is coming from. It's all the passing game. Like if we're going to go through and look at this, like I said, a lot of this is Drew Brees, different personnel, et cetera, et cetera. But during that time period, we had 12 top 5 finishes in passing yards per season. 12 finishes inside the top 5 in the NFL in passing yards for the New Orleans Saints. 1 finish as a bottom 10. So this is greatly exaggerated if we're going to be looking at the passing yards compared to the overall points scored. And of course, you're going to see that the exact opposite is going to be true with the rushing production of these offenses, where you've only had 1 top 5 finish in rushing yards and 5 bottom 10 finishes. So what we've historically seen from Sean Payton offenses with the New Orleans Saints is there are 1 million points scored through the air, very few points scored on the ground, but so many points scored overall in their respective offenses that almost everybody's extremely valuable. I want to reiterate, that's not saying this is going to be the same case in Denver. But what I do want to look at is the value that you are getting these Denver Broncos players at. Because y'all know the Denver Broncos last season was a team I wasn't investing into. The only player that I was investing into for the Denver Broncos in redraft leagues was actually KJ Hamler on Underdog. That was the only player I was drafting. In Dynasty, I was grabbing some Jerry Jeudy just because he was at a significant discount compared to Courtland Sutton. And back then, I was called a clown every single day that I woke up, because every single day I woke up, I decided to turn on this camera and talk about how overrated Courtland Sutton was and how Jerry Jeudy was the true wide receiver 1 while being 4 years younger. So keep in mind, I don't have a lot of Denver Bronco exposure across my Dynasty teams, but I have found myself drafting the hell out of Russell Wilson recently in Dynasty startup mock drafts. Because if we head over real quick and pull up some of the mock drafts that we've had on this channel, I mean, I found myself consistently getting Russell Wilson as my second, as my third quarterback in Superflex leagues. And the main reason for this is his contract. We say this every single time we take him because it's been a little embarrassing how much I've been drafting Russell Wilson. But if I'm going to go through and look at the price point we've been getting as of late, like if we're looking at the stream that we had about 3 days ago, I ended up grabbing Russell Wilson in the middle of the 7th round. I grabbed Russell Wilson after guys like George Pickens, Calvin Ridley, Zach Charbonnet, and this is in a super flex draft. And if we're going to be looking at his contract, for the reason why I've been doing this is, hell, you have a guaranteed starting quarterback through 2025. If they decided to move on from him this offseason, they would still owe him $107 million guaranteed. If they decided to move on from him in 2024, they would still owe him $85 million guaranteed. If they decided to move on from him in 2025, they would still owe him $50 million guaranteed. So Russell Wilson's essentially a guaranteed starter at minimum for the next 2 to 3 seasons. And we were saying maybe, just maybe, you could tell yourself a story with this offense that what ended up happening is Tim Patrick goes down before the season. Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy both deal with injuries throughout the year. And you have KJ Hamler missing the majority of this season. Throw on Javonte Williams. Throw on Alberto. You have almost everybody in this offense getting injured. You had a horrible coaching staff. So in the 7th round, if it's a possibility that we get that Russ bounce back, that's a fair price point. And I was investing at that price every day of the week. Now, this offensive change, in my mind, only makes that a better pick. I would honestly probably say Russell Wilson should be going an entire round before this. Like, we are looking at this mock draft here that has Joe Mixon going at the end of the 6th. I'd rather have Russell Wilson over Joe Mixon in a Superflex league. Hell, I'd maybe rather have Russell Wilson over Jerry Jeudy in a Superflex league, if I'm going to be honest with you. Because if we go over and look at the Denver Broncos wide receivers here, well, yeah, I agree with you. Jerry Jeudy's the wide receiver 1, and Courtland Sutton has historically been the most overrated player in Dynasty football, which is something I've been talking about for years and years and years, and I've been getting clowned on for years and years and years because of it. At this point, I think people have maybe gone a little bit too far in the other direction. If we're going to be looking at receiving yards per game, Jerry Jeudy was the wide receiver 1 at 64.8 with Courtland Sutton at 55.5. Keep in mind, both players ended up dealing with injuries. But if I'm going to be pulling up their current dynasty price, it is just a night and day difference that you are going to have. Back when Courtland Sutton was, in my mind, the most overrated player in dynasty football, he was going as the wide receiver 16. Now he is the wide receiver 43. This is after coming up from the Sean Payton trade. He actually got down to being the wide receiver 50 at one point. So if I'm going to be looking at Courtland Sutton at wide receiver 43, at this point, he's not overrated. At this point, I would actually kind of be fine investing into Courtland Sutton as the wide receiver 5 on my dynasty team. If I'm going to be going over and looking at Jerry Jeudy, who's risen surprisingly, now being the wide receiver 22 in Dynasty, I don't know how comfortable I am with this price point because we have to remember KJ Hamler, Tim Patrick, this wide receiver depth is going to be coming back this next season to the Denver Broncos. And maybe there isn't a bona fide alpha wide receiver 1, as we've always been saying. So I think you honestly just kind of take the discount. You just invest into whoever's cheapest in this offense. I really like that Russell Wilson price point in the middle of the 7th. I don't want to act like this is all of a sudden an elite offense, but the discount's there where if they were able to turn it around, you can profit. And going over to Kellen Moore, going over to the Los Angeles Chargers, I think that this is pretty important. I don't want to sit here and act like I am Kellen Moore's biggest fanboy. I think from a real life perspective, not a great offensive coordinator. From a real life perspective, I don't think that this all of a sudden makes the Los Angeles Chargers a Super Bowl contender, as a lot of people wanted them to be. But from a fantasy football perspective, it matters. From a fantasy football perspective, you really want players that are in this Kellen Moore offense, because one thing and one thing alone, and that is going to be the pace of play. Obviously, you want players and offenses that are going to have a high pace of play. You want as many plays run as possible because that equals more carries, that equals more targets to go around for all your skill positional players. And with Kellen Moore, if we're going to be looking at neutral game script for the Dallas Cowboys over the past 5 seasons, The year before he took over as the offensive coordinator in 2018, they were 23rd in the NFL in offensive pace in game neutral environments. But the second that he took over as the offensive coordinator, everything changed. 2019, they're getting off a play every 27 seconds. That's tied for 4th in the NFL. 2020, every 26 seconds. That's 2nd in the NFL. 2021, 25 seconds. That's 1st in the NFL. This past season, 27 seconds. That is 4th in the NFL. So every single season, we've seen the Dallas Cowboys be a top 5 offense in their game neutral pace of play. I think that should carry over to the Los Angeles Chargers. And going back to what we were discussing in a video yesterday, I actually kind of like possibly going through and buying the dip on a Mike Williams for that reason. Very similar to what we discussed with a lot of these guys. Mike Williams was severely overrated last year, but now Keenan Allen's another year older. Now you're getting him at a significant discount just because he had an injury-riddled season this past year. And if we're going to be looking at the contract situation, you could end up seeing Keenan Allen possibly being let go for 2024, and that allowing Mike Williams to be the unquestioned alpha #1 target in that Los Angeles Chargers offense. I think it's probably pretty good for Justin Herbert. Hard to get much better for Herbert with where he's been though. Now, one thing I do want to look at will be Tom Brady. First thing I need to address is, yeah, Tom Brady's not coming back. I know a lot of people are making memes saying, oh, okay, yeah, we'll see you this season, Tom, blah, blah, blah. It's not happening. Okay. Tom Brady's going to be done for good. And I've seen a lot of people say, okay, well, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers only have Kyle Trask under contract. Kyle Trask's the only guy that they have. I guess this means that he is going to be there. No, don't go down that road. I promise you, Kyle Trask is nothing. He has no future with this team. I think his best bet is to show a little something to earn himself as a spot as a career backup and just continue to get those paychecks. That would be phenomenal for Kyle Trask, and I'm really rooting for him to do that. But for you to assume that he has any shot at all to be the starting quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I think that would be crazy. If we were going to go through and look at some quarterbacks that could possibly, just possibly, be going over to Tampa, Jimmy Garoppolo would make some sense. Derek Carr would make some sense. I'm not saying these quarterbacks would want to go to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm saying they may have no other option. You could get Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo, Ryan Tannehill, Zach Wilson, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Jameis Winston. Honestly, any rookie in this year's draft class, I would be willing to bet that you have a journeyman NFL quarterback going over there, and maybe even you get a Trey Lance trade, a Jordan Love trade, or a rookie before you see anything from Trask. And this will, in my mind, bump up both the San Francisco 49er quarterbacks, because obviously there were a lot of people thinking that Brady could end up in San Francisco this next year. And if we're going to be looking at this scenario, they've already told us Jimmy Garoppolo is not going to be back in. So I tweeted out, I believe about a week ago at this point, that Trey Lance will either be one of two things this next season. He's either going to be backing up Brock Purdy, which will suck, or he's going to be a top 5 fantasy quarterback. Now, of course, I cannot sit here and say that Trey Lance will be a good real-life quarterback. I don't think anybody that plays Dynasty Fantasy Football knows if real-life NFL quarterback prospects will be good or bad, but we do know from a fantasy football context that it doesn't matter when you're stepping into the situation in San Francisco where you're surrounded by George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey. You have all the rushing upside in the world. That will be a position where you can have success from a fantasy football standpoint, primarily driven with your rushing upside. But still, I do need to at least admit he hasn't played football since 2019, so it's hard for me to go all in. That's why I'm saying there's a decent shot that he's also backing up Brock Purdy. Very interesting to see how this offseason is going to play out, but I think that's all we got for this video. If you enjoyed it, go down there, drop a like, subscribe to Full Blade Dynasty. If you want to get in a draft with us, if you want to check out any of these Super Bowl player props, link in the comment section, link in the description. Sign up for Underdog with promo code FLOCK. They'll match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $200, and you'll get our 2023 Dynasty rankings. Thank you again. I appreciate you. I really hope you have a great day, and really hope we get to see you with the video tomorrow.